Well, shalom all. My name is Todd Bennett, and I am recording a newsletter that was sent out on day 27 of month 10 on the Creator's calendar, which is also reckoned as January 1st, 2022 in Babylonian time. Now, for the set apart people of Elohim, it is Sabbath, Shabbat, a set apart day of rest that actually commemorates the first week of creation when the Creator finished his work and rested. Last week, we emphasized the importance of the Sabbath, but maybe I neglected to emphasize just how important the Sabbath really is. I thought it'd be good to review the final words spoken by Yah before he gave Moses the 2 tablets of stone on Mount Sinai, which literally solidified the covenant and etched it in stone. And we read that as follows in Exodus 31:12 through 17. And Yah spoke to Moses, saying, Speak also to the children of Israel, saying, Surely my Sabbath you shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am Yah who sanctifies you. You shall keep the Sabbath, therefore, for it is holy to you. Everyone who profanes it shall surely be put to death, for whoever does any work on it, that person shall be cut off from among his people. Work shall be done for 6 days, but the seventh is the Sabbath of rest, holy to Yah. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day, he shall surely be put to death. Therefore, the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations as a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel. For in 6 days Yah made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. Exodus 31:12 through 17. Now this is taken from the New King James translation. I usually correct some of the translator's errors and restore the names, such as Yod-He Vav-He is often replaced by the Lord, and we often see God where there should be Elohim. And I did make those changes, but this time I left some of the words like holy and sanctifies. In the Hebrew, we see the root of these terms being kadash and kodesh, kuf dalet shin, which is often translated as holy, sanctify, sacred, and consecrate. I left the English words in there just so that maybe they would pop out at you. Now, as I've discussed in my videos and teachings, all these English words are abstract Western words, and they don't always relate to the concrete meaning of the Hebrew language. A more concrete understanding of that kuf dalet shin root is apartness and separation. Therefore, the English phrase set apart is often used to express those Hebrew words. So we're supposed to keep, which is shamar in Hebrew, or better yet, guard the Sabbath because it is set apart. Now, this is the same commandment given to the man in the garden. He was supposed to tend or work the garden, and he was supposed to watch over it. Again, shamar. We read that in Genesis 2:15. Likewise, we have the same privilege and purpose as Adam. We have been allotted space on this earth to work for 6 days, and then we are to rest from that work on the seventh day. We're supposed to keep and watch over that day as Adam was instructed to do in the garden. The Sabbath day is supposed to be like the Garden of Eden to us. It is our little slice of paradise. And of course, Eden means paradise. So the Shabbat is our little slice of paradise gifted to us from the Creator. What you make of it largely depends on how well you guard it and keep it. So the question for all of us is whether we will guard it at all. I know many people are quick to judge Adam for not watching. He did not protect the woman from the wiles of the serpent. He failed his duties as a watchman. Well, each and every week we can step into his sandals, so to speak. We have an opportunity to test and hone our watchman skills and see how we fare against Nahash and his attempts to invade the protected space of our gardens. Are our homes truly set apart on Shabbat? And are we keeping watch to ensure that we remain set apart? I think when we understand our need to be like watchmen over this day, it adds to the importance. Further, when we understand that this was the culmination of the covenant formation with Israel, when Yah was giving the actual sign that would exist throughout their generations, the day carries much more weight. And how about the fact that the death penalty was associated with this commandment? Did that get your attention? Then, when you understand that it was part of a relationship that involved Yah as a husband and Yisrael as a bride, it's even more significant. Yah wants his bride to work for 6 days, but then wants her to rest on the seventh day. He set the example on the first day of creation. Now, imagine Yah going to work and providing for his family, and that's what he was doing that first week of creation. That's not something we commonly think about, though. And imagine further his bride Yisrael staying home and taking care of the home that Yah built, and of course that was the mandate given to the man and the woman from the very beginning. The Shabbat is a sign that you're actually in that relationship. You're in that husband-bride relationship. When you visibly rest on a Sabbath, it's like wearing a wedding ring. It's a visible sign that sets us apart so that the world knows we are in a covenant relationship with the Creator himself. Now imagine that your husband works all week just so he can stay home and be with his wife in a place that she's been preparing. And then she decides to leave and go to work or go shopping. Imagine that. That's just a glimpse into what's happening when people who claim to be his bride don't carry his sign. It's a personal affront to his authority and provision as a husband and provider. Now, did you notice that the Sabbath is holy to Israel and holy to Yah? So Yah also observes this sign, making it most holy. And the fulfillment of the Sabbath sign, therefore, culminates in the Holy of Holies, which is likened to the bridal chamber, where the Ark of the Covenant was placed. After Israel committed idolatry with the golden calf, which was literally adultery, the bridal chamber of the house was going to be off limits, except one day a year when atonements were made. It pointed to the fact that something more was needed for the bride to return to the bridal chamber. And this is the goal and the purpose of the Messiah, coming to call out a bride from the nations and then shedding his blood for that bride. Now, sadly, while the Christian religion often gets the bride and the bridegroom theme of the scriptures, most Christians generally reject the renewed covenant that restores the broken relationship and the sign of that relationship as well. In other words, they won't take the vows and fully commit to the relationship. And we talked about that last week when they literally agreed to all the words and said, I do. In other words, they were agreeing to the marriage covenant. And they were sprinkled with blood after that point. The patterns were all there. Obviously, we need the blood of Yeshua to make final atonement so that we can get into that bridal chamber, but we have to follow the terms of the covenant relationship that have been set forth. Failing to do that defines us as lawlessness when we reject the terms of the covenant of Torah. Now, countless lawless Christians believe that they are the bride that the Messiah is returning for, when he already warned them that he doesn't know them. In fact, in Matthew 7:21 through 23, he says, I never knew you. People that are doing signs and casting out demons and prophesying in his name. He says, I never knew you, because they are lawless, and he defines them as lawless. So the bottom line is that you cannot be lawless and remain in the covenant. That's evident from the very sign of the covenant that is perpetual and forever. Now, Look at another passage that details the Sabbath and sets it as the first, or the reshit, of the appointed times. And we read it in Leviticus 23, 1 through 4. It says, "And Yah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, The appointed times of Yah, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations. These are my feasts. 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no work on it. It is the Sabbath of Yah in all your dwellings. These are the feasts of Yah, holy convocations, which you shall proclaim at their appointed times." Now, once again, we see the emphasis on holy, set apart, when it talks about the Shabbat. And not only does this passage place the Sabbath as the first of the appointed times, it also separates it from all the others. Through a process known as resumptive repetition, the passage essentially brackets and separates the weekly Sabbath from the other annual appointed times. If you break it down, you can actually see it. So take another look at that portion. Leviticus 23:2, you kind of see the opening bracket. The appointed times of Yah, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations. These are my feasts. Then we see the focus, the Sabbath, in Leviticus 23:3. 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no work on it. It is the Sabbath of Yah in all your dwellings. And then we see the closing bracket in Leviticus 23:4. These are the feasts of Yah, holy convocations, which you shall proclaim at their appointed times. So we see Leviticus 23:2 and Leviticus 23:4 are the brackets that place the focus on the Sabbath of Yah. They surround it and encompass it with a very similar phrase. So there's incredible focus and preeminence built in and around this special day. And in the last message, we highlighted the fact that the frequency of the observance also points to its significance. It is literally built into the fabric of creation and time. Indeed, we're reminded of time every seventh day, and this continuous count actually directly connects us to the Creator and the first week of creation. We are connected with that creation week through the counting of continual weeks. Now, in the previous message, I also pointed out the contrast between the sign of the Sabbath and the celebration of Christmas, which both occurred on the same day. Well, here we are again. Today, while the covenant people are resting and observing the sign of the covenant on the seventh day, much of the world is celebrating the beginning of a new year. Of course, we all know it's not a new year according to the Creator, right? I know what you're thinking. Oh no, here he goes again talking about time. Well, bear with me because this is important, especially for those who are new to this subject. I mentioned in the last message that the months did not have names until the Yahudim ascribed names to them while in Babylon. The only things actually given names were the Sabbath day and likewise the Sabbath year. Now remember also that every 50th year was given a special name, the Jubilee or Yovel. They're given names because they are set apart and are integral to creation and the reckoning of time. Otherwise, the Creator numbers the days and the months, and day one of month one marks the beginning of a new year, otherwise known as Rosh Hashanah, head of the year. Now, I know there's Jewish tradition that places Rosh Hashanah on the Day of Trumpets, which are the Day of Blasting, which is day one of month 7. But if we're talking about the beginning of the year, we're looking at day 1 of month 1 being Rosh Hashanah. Now, we're currently in month 10 on the Creator's calendar. The Roman calendar observes January 1st. It's the beginning of their solar year. Now remember that the ancient Roman calendar originally only had 10 months. January and February did not exist, and the yearly cycle began in March. Around the year 700 BCE, the Roman king Numa Pompilius is said to have added the 2 winter months. January was Mensis Ianuarius, the month of Janus. Janus, now commonly called Janus, was the ancient Roman god of beginnings, of passage, and time itself. And remember that there was no letter J in any language until recently in history. And that's how we know that Jesus is not the actual name of the Hebrew Messiah. The corruption of the Messiah's name goes beyond the letter J, though. If that were the case, if it was just about the fact that there was no J, then we would be calling him Joshua or Jahushua. Um, Instead, the name Jesus is etymologically detached and separated from the Hebrew name Yahushua, and it's specifically connected with a healing god and a child of Zeus named Jesus. With the pagan god Janus, we simply have the issue of the J sound. So the month that we call January was originally named after the god Janus, now commonly referred to as Janus. Now, Janus was seen as the god of gateways and transitions, and according to Plutarch, Janus was attributed with transitioning human existence out of its bestial and savage state. So this is a particularly important deity for those seeking to implement a great reset into a new world order, those that see that the human race is evolving and they want to bring us to the next level. So we can see Janus fits nicely into their scheme of things. And so how many people have you heard saying, I hope 2022 is better than 2021? They're looking at January 1st as a reset, a time for a change and a new and better year ahead. They're making New Year's resolutions, and so they're gauging their time for a reset at January 1st. Now, originally, the month of January had 29 days and came after December, but the Roman year still began in March. So January used to be the 11th month on the Roman calendar until a rebellion in 154 BCE forced the Roman Senate to change the beginning of the civil year from March to January 1st. With this reform, January officially became the first month of the year in 153 BCE. Now, in the year 46 BCE, Julius Caesar introduced a new calendar system called the Julian calendar. He added 10 days to the year and introduced the leap day. In the Julian calendar, January was expanded to 31 days. The calendar was later adjusted by Pope Gregory XIII to correct the calendar drift against the solar year. The point was to completely align the calendar with the sun and the solar cycle while completely ignoring the moon. So, the current reckoning of time used by much of the world derives from the Roman Empire and the Roman Catholic Church. Rome, as we also know, created a new Sabbath day, Sunday. The Roman Catholic Church declared Sunday to be the mark or the sign of its authority. And of course, this was only natural for a sun-worshipping culture. Christianity became the new religion of the Roman Empire that fused pagan traditions with the scriptures, and in many ways opposed to the Creator and His order of things. Now, if you follow the Roman religion, you will not be set apart, as Yah describes through His commandments, and you will not be displaying the sign of His covenant. Instead, you'll likely be in a large group of people wishing each other Happy New Year today, and then displaying the mark of the Catholic Church tomorrow, on Sunday. Most of those individuals are unwittingly opposing the truth of Yah. Now imagine all the people who truly think that they're walking in truth and just celebrated the birth of Messiah last week during the pagan celebration of Christmas. And now imagine all the people who think this is the beginning of a new year when we're actually still in month 10. And now consider that they're profaning the true Sabbath and honoring the Sabbath of the religion of Babylon. They are completely out of sync with the Creator, and what a massive deception that's going on. And we know that it doesn't end there. We've been talking about the worldwide deception going on for the past couple of years now, relating to other issues. Now, the ancient Roman year used to begin in March, as we discussed, and that's very similar to the Creator's calendar, which begins in spring, in the month of the Abib. Now, notice I said the month of the Abib, Chodesh HaAbib in Hebrew. That's what the scriptures describe. They do not indicate that there is a month named Aviv, and I give you several passages here which which show that it's the month of the Abib. Now, by adding months and days and then reordering those months, it demonstrates how a pure solar calendar is detached from the method prescribed in the scriptures. According to the text of Genesis, the sun and the moon are two great lights that the Creator set in the sky to mark time for us. And when we read that in Genesis 1:14 through 16, it says, Then Elohim said, Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and moedim. A lot of English translations say seasons, but the Hebrew word is moedim, and it means appointed times. And for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth. And it was so. Then Elohim made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. Now, by using the lights built into creation, we are kept in sync with creation as well as the Creator. Days are easy, they go by the cycle of the sun. Weeks are easy, we simply count the passage of days. Months are also easy. They are determined by the cycle of the moon. Indeed, the word for month is chodesh, which means renewal. We begin each month with the sighting of the light from the renewed moon. Now, we were taken from the dust of the earth, and we are intimately associated with the cycles built into this creation, whether we realize it or not. Most of the world is completely detached through technology and modernity. Most people do not grow their own food or raise their own animals, so they are just unaware of the cycles of life that are going on all around them. They're living in an artificial reality that is being guided by artificial intelligence toward an artificial future in the metaverse, and all of this is being reckoned by artificial time. For instance, there's no such thing as a 31-day lunar month, yet both December and January had 31 days in them, as well as March, May, July, August, and October. So there's no way for these artificial calendars to stay in sync with the cycles that are built into creation without adjustments. And since solar calendars do not utilize both great lights, they have to add days and make changes like we've seen through history. As a result, they can change time all they want because it's not fixed to anything except for the solar cycle. The various revisions made by Julius Caesar and Pope Gregory the 13th were intended to contain the calendar within a solar year, again, which contrasts with the description in Genesis 1. Now, I don't care whether you follow Rome's solar calendar or some solar calendar found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. We see people that are, always shifting and changing calendars, when they find a new one or a new text. If it doesn't factor in the moon, it does not comply with the Torah. It's that simple. And that leaves us with the question, how do we determine a year using the sun and the moon? Now, notice I did not mention using barley crops because that is not a determining factor in the Torah. Some people have adopted the Karaite tradition of examining barley crops at the end of the year to make a determination of when the next year begins. They make this divergence from the Torah by interpreting that phrase that we talked about, the month of the Abib, as the month of Aviv. They then take another leap, connecting the Hebrew word Aviv exclusively with barley. They then create a definition of what constitutes Aviv barley, and then establish a subjective standard of what constitutes a sufficient amount of Aviv barley in the land in month 12 to declare the following renewed moon day 1 of month 1 in a new year. Now, this is all man-made tradition, and it involves adding to the Torah, which is specifically prohibited. And we read that prohibition in Deuteronomy 4:2 and 12:32. Yes, it is an important attempt to place Passover at the time when a barley offering can be made during the Feast of Unleavened Bread. We know that there is a barley offering made during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, but it shows how good intentions can lead to deception. It's not up to us to make sure that there's sufficient barley there for Passover. In fact, the scriptures allow for parching the barley if it's not even what you would consider to be fully ripened at that point. So there are provisions in the Torah. We don't need to add anything. We just need to follow the simplicity of the commandments. And if Yah tells us to make a barley offering on day 16 of month 1, and we are determining the year using the sun and the moon, then he's going to have to provide us with that barley in order to accomplish his commandments if we're following his commandments. So the real test is whether we will stay true to the instructions of the Creator and not add to his word or take away from his word. Will we completely rely on the commandments of Yah or try to improve upon them? That's what the woman did in the garden, and that's what the Pharisees did by building a fence around the Torah. Yah does not need us to build a fence around his Torah, nor does he want us to. He just wants us to take on his light and easy yoke and follow his commandments, diligently follow his commandments that are not too difficult. Ultimately, one of the primary reasons why reckoning time is so important is so we can keep the appointed times that we've been talking about. The Pope is not interested in keeping appointments with Yah, and he's not shepherding people on the righteous covenant path that leads to Yah. That is why Christians can so easily follow a Roman calendar and Roman holy days rather than the scriptural appointed times, because they're not looking in the right direction. They're not looking at the right place or the right time. Now, remember, the appointed times belong to Yah. They are his times. They're not our times. You're not doing Yah a favor or fulfilling a mitzvot by observing his times whenever you feel like it or whenever your local group is deciding to hold a celebration. He has allocated very specific times to meet with him, and it is up to us to keep those appointments properly and diligently. Now imagine if a prospective employer scheduled an interview for a certain day and time, and you decided to show up a month late. Do you think you're going to get that job? As a result of traditions, many well-meaning people end up missing their appointments with Elohim. Sadly, certain Messianic and Hebrew roots individuals have adopted the traditions of the Karaites and Pharisees and promote them as truth. The practice of using barley crops to determine the beginning of the year is a tradition that adds to the Torah, as I said. Now, again, I understand the reason why the Karaites do this, but it does not excuse the fact that they are adding to the Torah. To their credit, they use the observable moon to begin their months. The Pharisees, on the other hand, don't use the lights for months or years at all. They just use a calculation. So if you decide to follow the Pharisees, you are literally walking in darkness. You can expect to be found among the 5 foolish virgins who did not have oil in their lamps. They wanted to go to the wedding, but they missed it. They showed up late and heard the words, "Assuredly I say to you, I do not know you," in Matthew 25:12. Now, it's important to remember when we look, I quote this parable of the 10 virgins a lot because I think it's really significant to us. And I also talk about the Olivet Discourse a lot. And it's important to remember that Yeshua spoke this parable of 10 virgins on the Mount of Olives immediately after he spoke the words known as the Olivet Discourse. There was no break in time, and I encourage you to just take a look at what was happening here. He spoke these words on the Mount of Olives immediately following his rebuke of the Pharisees in the temple, Matthew 23. So if you go back and see what happened within probably the course of maybe a couple hours, even less possibly, it's quite incredible how connected these are to one another. So as a result, it really amazes me how many Messianic groups follow the Pharisaic calendar under the mistaken proposition that they were the last ones with the authority to make Torah decisions, and that is simply not true. Yeshua dressed them down in Matthew 23, and then he went on to give these warnings to his disciples. So anybody that now is following this brood of vipers that he called them, he said they weren't getting into the kingdom and they were keeping others out of the kingdom. I mean, so anybody that now would follow the Torah the way the Pharisees prescribe is completely missing what the Messiah has taught. So these people are truly walking in darkness, and they're obviously not heeding the words of Messiah when he warned his disciples concerning the leaven of the scribes and the Pharisees, which was their doctrines and their hypocrisy. Now, the Jewish calendar is the leaven of the scribes and Pharisees, just like the Gregorian calendar is the leaven of Babylon and Rome. Yeshua gave his disciples the authority to bind and to loose, which involved interpreting the Torah and rendering judgments. And we've talked about this throughout the past months, and that is exactly what James was doing in Acts 15 that we looked at last week. He was providing a means for the Gentiles to come out of the nations and into the covenant assembly of Israel through a process of becoming set apart. Being set apart involves avoiding all of the leaven concerning time and the calendar. Now, in fact, it's interesting because even the formula given by James was mentioning that Moses was read in the synagogue every Shabbat. So obviously he was incorporating the Shabbat into the the commandments that the converts would follow, that they would stop doing certain things and then they would go understand and observe Shabbat and hear the words of the Torah on Shabbat. So, as we become set apart from the pagan traditions concerning time, we must also be sure that we do not adopt Jewish traditions that derive from the Pharisees and the Karaites. And in order to walk in the light, we must actually look at the lights in the heavens and use those lights to guide us in the covenant path. All we need is the two great lights. They are the hands on Yah's clock. We don't need barley to tell time. We don't need subjective reports from barley inspection teams to determine if there are sufficient amounts of Aviv barley in the land to call a new year. I mean, again, it's all man-made tradition that adds to the Torah instead of simply relying on the lights. Now, all of this confusion about time is a clue that time must be pretty important. In fact, it's clear to discern that most of the world is living under a delusion involving time and a lot of other things. But I see a lot of prophecy teachers who are trying to, tell us what's going to happen in the future based upon the Gregorian calendar, the Catholic calendar, and they're completely missing it. Unless you understand how Yah reckons time, you'll never understand the future, and you won't be able to determine future dates. So most people are under a delusion, including the Christians and the prophecy teachers and all that. And people generally have no idea what time it is, and they're being herded like sheep to the slaughter. And while the world is celebrating a new year, we look to another time for the beginning of a new cycle. We just passed a turn in the year commonly referred to as the winter solstice. It's the shortest day of the year in terms of light. From now on, those days are getting longer until we reach equilibrium when day and night are equal. Now, again, we talk about how the pagans have distorted these times, but let's not forget, these were built into creation by the Mighty One, the creator of all things, Yah, Elohim. So he built these turns into it. The pagans took them and ran, and incorporated them into their fertility rites and such. But Yah built in the turn. So that's very significant to recognize. And the upcoming turn is called the vernal or spring equinox because it occurs in the time of spring. Now, we already discussed that the Karaites place a special connection between the Hebrew word they call Aviv, Abib, and a certain stage in the development of barley crops, but this is not really correct. The Hebrew word Abib is the next ordinal word in the Hebrew language after father, Ab, and it means new life and springing forth. In other words, it is when everything turns green, and it refers to what we experience in the spring. And it's amazing the connection between the father and Abib, the father and new life. So the common understanding is that the month of the Abib is the month of spring, when everything turns green. This is the time of the Passover when Yah specifically instructed Moses and Aharon, "This month shall be your beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you." Of course, this time of year is all connected with the spring equinox, a time specifically tied to the sun, and the renewed moon closest to the equinox begins the month of the Abib, the Reshit, or the first month when Reshit, first offering of the grain harvest, is presented, and we already mentioned that. So, a more detailed description of this process found on the Torah calendar, and I invite you to examine the article titled Determining the Hebrew Year on the Torah calendar website. It's www.torahcalendar.com. You can also check out the Walk in Light series book entitled Appointed Times to discuss how the year is determined. We know that most ancient cultures were keyed to the spring equinox. They knew how to determine this most important turn because it pointed to a renewal of life that was built into the fabric of creation, like time. Next week, we look forward to the renewal of a new month after sunset on January 4th. That will begin month 11. We still have some time until those in the covenant with Yah celebrate a new year. So instead of Happy New Year, today I bid you Shabbat Shalom, Barakot.